Good morning and good afternoon to all of you guys that are tuning in. This is the Marketo Engage Champion Office Hours for December. So we're really excited to have you all here today. I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping items. My name is Jess Darnell. I'm on the Adobe Customer Marketing team, and I'll be hosting the webinar. It is going to be recorded, and it will be shared to your email after this event. If you have any questions for the champions during this time, please ask them in the Q&A box on your screen. You'll be able to type in that question and click submit, and we'll see that on our end. And if you're posting on social media, please use our hashtag #MarketingNation. I'll be going through the champions. They're going to be introducing themselves. Chris, let's start with you. Chris Wilcox. We have two of them today.
That's right. Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Wilcox. I'm Director of Digital Marketing and Automation at Hartford Funds. So in the financial services industry, from a Marketo perspective, I've been a user for about 3.5 years. We do a ton with nurture programs and not baked within kind of the engagement program structure. So lots of default program workflows and things like that. Lots of velocity script, a lot of templating as well. So if you have questions on those kind of topics, I can hopefully lend some advice or some best practices there. Thanks so much for having me.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Chris. Natalie, let's go to you next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Kremer. I'm the Marketing Automation Manager at McGraw-Hill Higher Ed. I've been using Marketo for just over 5 years. I'm here at McGraw-Hill, so we've had a lot of time to build out, best practices, program templates, all that good stuff. My passion in Marketo is campaign operations and really, process and documentation. So if you have any questions around that, definitely feel free to put that in the chat.
Great. Thanks so much, Natalie. Chris, let's go to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Saporito. I am the Associate Manager of Marketing Technology at Paycor, and I've been using Marketo for about 5.5 years now. Some things that we utilize a lot with Marketo is program templates as well. We do a lot of events and webinars through Marketo, and nurtures are also a big strategy of ours using Marketo.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. Megan, let's go to you last.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Crone. I am the Marketing Automation Admin at Insights, so I'm in the technology industry, and I've also been using Marketo for about 5 years. My, focus area or specialty is building out custom integrations for the CRM and any integrations into Marketo. So if you have any questions around integrations, hopefully I can help you out.
Awesome. So we'll go into the Q&A. We have some questions already set up for y'all. So Chris S., let's start with you. The question for you was, my instance is so slow. How do I speed it up?
Yeah, this is a great question. And honestly, it's something that you're not just going to fix one time. It's something that you always have to keep in the back of your mind. So a couple of things that I have that we do on a regular basis, 3 kind of steps or 3 areas that we look at. First one is being probably the most important. It's reducing the number of overall active smart campaign triggers that you have in your instance. So for a company like ours, we're growing, at a pretty high rate. We're doing a lot more programs, a lot more campaigns running through Marketo. So we always are activating new triggered campaigns. And over time, that just accumulates and ultimately slows down the instance. So what we do is quarterly, our team will go back and deactivate campaigns that aren't being used anymore to reduce the overall number of triggers in your instance and ultimately speed up the overall kind of bandwidth of your instance. So if you're not familiar with that, one way that you can look at the active smart campaigns in your instance would be to go to your marketing activities, and then up towards the top, you can actually click a drop down for the campaign inspector. Within that, you have the option to click through scheduled smart campaigns. You have triggered smart campaigns, which is what we want to target here. And there you can actually export and look at overall the number of active triggered campaigns that you have in your instance. So that's a good place to start, again, and a good place to monitor how many you actively have going at one time. There's not a set number that's right for you. Again, it's something that you should just be aware of and look at time to time and kind of keep in the back of your mind that you don't want to have a bunch of unnecessary triggers throughout your instance. Second thing I'd recommend is something that helped us with really smart list loading. So we have about 1.5 million records or leads in our database. So we were building a lot of one-off smart lists all the time, whether it be to target emails, to target nurtures, digital campaigns, so on and so forth. And I noticed that over time, those smart lists were taking longer and longer to load. So recently, Marketo's put in some improvements that have significantly improved that. But one way that we kind of combated that over time was to actually create segmentations to have a list that we go to, things that we were using over and over again that just reduces the amount of time it takes for us to load list, again, to target, whether it be email, so on and so forth. So by creating the segmentations, you can actually have those lists already, it just takes less time to run than it does for a smart list to create those one-off campaigns. So again, it cleans up your instance. You don't have to use as many smart lists over and over again. You can have your segmentation and reference that within smart campaigns that you're targeting or sending an email or whatever that may be. But segmentations are a good way to declutter the amount of smart lists that you have active in your instance as well. The last place or third step that I'd take a look at or recommend would be assets in your database. So it could be forms, landing pages, just the overall number of assets that you have created. You'll just want to be mindful of how many of those you create. Forms, for example, are a good one that we had a bad habit of creating a new form for one-off requests all the time. So instead of doing that, what you can do is have kind of general forms that you can use in multiple places. So you can have one form that can be used on 50 different landing pages compared to 50 different landing pages, all with their own form. So that's a good way to, again, be mindful of the number of things that you're creating in your instance and ultimately declutter and have more bandwidth by reducing the overall number of assets in your instance. So those are the top three. Again, reduce the number of overall active smart campaigns, use segmentation as a way to build your target lists. And then third would be to reduce the overall number of assets active in your instance at one time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. Next question that we have, this will be going to Chris W. I am a newbie to velocity scripting. In a nutshell, what is it? When can I use it? And how do I implement it?
Sure. It's a great question, and a question that I hear all the time across everybody, I feel like, in marketing nation. Basically, Velocity is a scripting language that you can use to code content for your emails. So specifically, it's deployed within an email asset. It's kind of where it lives. But basically, it's a coding language that you can use to write more robust rules or personalization than you could using kind of snippets or traditional dynamic content. It is a little tough to get started because it's a little ambiguous if you've never worked in code, if you've never worked in any kind of logic-based code. But basically, it's a giant if this, then that engine, right? That you can say, hey, if a person or if a contact meets these conditions, I'd like to do this thing for that contact. And if they don't, I'd like to do this other thing. There's a whole lot you can do. I actually see another question coming in here that I'll get to in a second. But the best place to get started, I would say, the community is a huge place. I actually wrote a piece over the summer called Upping Your Token Game, which I would recommend checking out for sure, which basically just goes through exactly what I just said, but in more detail and in more useful manner, which is what is it? How do I get started? What are the tools of the trade? What are best practices? And really using it for simple stuff. The easiest times I can describe of like when you would use it versus something else is like, let's say you've got 3 or 4 different fields that you need to kind of reference all at the same time to do some personalization. Someone's in this territory and they're one of our top clients, and also they're selling product X or product Y. Well, to make a segmentation of that, to use Marketo's traditional personalization, all of a sudden you've got 15 or 20 segment values, if not more, to kind of accommodate those combinations. You can write that in a Velocity script with like 2 lines of code, and it's really, really easy to maintain and scale. So definitely take a peek at the Upping Your Token Game piece, and you can tag me in a question. I'm always around if you have a specific example. And we did get a question with one specific example. I hope you guys don't mind if I jump to it, but it's about comparing dates in Velocity. So the question is looking into figuring out how to date compare So they're looking at, if something is coming up in X number of days, how do you actually take the two raw date values and in velocity code how many days are left between the two? There is a date comparison tool in the kind of Apache Velocity tool set. I personally, frankly, haven't used it. My understanding is that you have to have them formatted as date objects, not like a string. And then there's a date comparison tool, and you can literally just put in like a variable and then the other variable you want to compare to, and it will output a number. So search about date comparison tool. I'm sure Sandy Whiteman has something in community about how to use it. The master of velocity, Sandy is. So there you go.
Awesome. Thanks so much for those resources and that answer, Chris. We're going on to Megan. Megan, this question is for you. When are workspaces necessary?
Yeah, so I kind of like to think of workspaces as kind of like putting up walls. So for us, we have different workspaces for different locations. So we have a workspace for US, we have a separate one for Canada and APAC, for example. I've also seen workspaces for different divisions of your business that you want to keep completely separate from each other. So really, it's an area, a dedicated area that you can work in that you only need kind of to see that area of Marketo. So if you don't really feel like you're going to need to do a lot of like sharing of different assets or campaigns, and you kind of want to think or keep everything separate, that's when I would recommend a different workspace.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Megan. Chris S., this question is for you. What are your recommendations for new users getting started with Marketo? An example of the community.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've had two new hires in the last couple of years that I've kind of gone through a new process of, what's the best way to get them acclimated to Marketo. In the recurring advice that I typically give out to my team is to utilize the community. The community is the best tool available out there for new people to understand and learn Marketo. For me, when I started using Marketo back in 2015, it was a good way for me to honestly just go in there, search around, see what other people are asking, see what other people are doing, what they're having trouble with, and it's a way for you to understand what everyone else is doing, but also how they're overcoming those obstacles. And by doing that, you just learn more about what Marketo is capable of, what you can do with it, what is available to you out there, and you also meet people, such as Chris, Natalie, and Megan that are openly willing to just give you knowledge about what they know about Marketo and pass that on to new users and existing users that are having trouble with things. So I can't emphasize enough utilizing the community to just learn, to meet new people that are doing the same things as you every day. And it's a free resource that everyone should be using. So I always recommend my team to get familiar with it, get comfortable with it. At first, I think people might be a little shy to ask questions on there or post on there, but there's absolutely no shame in asking questions, especially if you're new or old, honestly. So get out there, use the community, whether it's just, skimming through it, learning new things, or asking questions, answering questions as you learn more and give back to it once you are in a good spot to answer some of those questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. And Natalie, did you want to follow up with anything on that question?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the other big recommendations I would have, if you have new users getting in, we have a really robust set of program templates that we use in our Marketo instance. So when we have new people come on board, or we onboard new consultants or outside agencies, we kind of have a set standard that they can follow. So you're not trying to train someone, from scratch and how to create a program. You kind of have your process outlined within a program template. So it's super helpful, especially with things like integrations and kind of your most standard campaigns, that you have that set of programs someone can go to and have that baseline for getting started.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Natalie. Next question that will be going to Chris W. What recommendations do you have for managing reporting within Marketo, specifically with out-of-the-box reports, and what other platforms do you use for reporting?
All right, that's a great question. There's a lot of very useful things you can do from a reporting perspective, both inside and out of Marketo. From an out-of-the-box perspective, I mean, the business that I'm in is we're an asset manager, so we work with, it's a B2B situation, and we do a little bit less of lead generation because it's kind of a known universe of people that we do business with. So I frankly don't do a ton of lead lifecycle reporting, so I don't know if others on here want to speak to the lead lifecycle reports, but from like a marketing effectiveness reporting perspective, we most certainly use email performance reports across our entire instance on a weekly basis. We've also done some other interesting things, which is, for example, we like to try to keep a pulse on, how many messages people are receiving, on any given time frame, weekly or monthly. So we actually set up a scoring field that anytime an email is delivered to a contact, they get a +1 in those score fields. And then we have kind of a running people report people performance report in our analytics section, which basically just groups people by that value. And then I have that automated to like every Saturday, I get a list of here's how many people got how many emails this week out of your instance. It just really helps us keep a pulse on, are we over communicating? Are we under communicating? And you can add layers to that too. You could do that by segment or by target audience or something along those lines. But yeah, to me, it's all about email performance reports, which we use those for sure. You can layer on things on top of that by segmentation. We also do a lot of reporting, which is more like accounts of people who come in via smart lists or via triggers, which we then have our sales associates kind of subscribe to, so that they can get a list of how many people are coming in through this campaign or that campaign. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities. More of our more robust reporting does come via the API, where we basically extract all of the activity data into kind of our warehouse environment. And then we have kind of a more global reporting system set up there. The great thing about Marketo is that the API is so accessible. So there's a lot of great things you can do within the UI, but there's a lot of businesses, it's just like there's such specific business rules that the API for more advanced or more specific reporting does become the avenue. But the great news there is that the API is very, very robust, so it's certainly helpful. And I don't know if somebody else wants to jump in on lead lifecycle. I think, Megan, you said you might have something to add there.
Yeah, I can kind of talk about the lead lifecycle reporting. So for us, we do capture kind of all phases of the lead lifecycle, from anonymous to known to MQL, SQL, opportunity, closed won, all of those different statuses. So we kind of waterfall it in that way. We are capturing like acquisition program and lead source on everything. We also do the Discover Org enrichment. For us in particular, when people actually request contact. So we're getting that information to the sales teams when appropriate. We have the integration into Marketo set up for that, and then syncing. But in terms of reporting on that, we actually do use the API to export all of the data out, and we use Power BI to visualize the data. So we are kind of doing that outside of Marketo. But I do look at kind of like the performance. We do have the lead lifecycle kind of set up in Marketo, so I can monitor how long it's taking for people to move between the stages and kind of monitor, what campaigns need to be set up to keep people moving along and what we can kind of do to move the needle there.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. The next question that we have coming in that Chris Saporito is going to take, the question is, we have multiple Zoom meetings and webinars. Each have their own sign-up page, dates, and moderators. Each event has their own unique UTM for tracking. We want people to have a unique Zoom link for the event and to have an automated email go out to remind people to attend the Zoom event.
Yeah, so our company does about 120 to 150, depending on the year, webinars per year. So this is very similar to what we're doing. And the way that we scale this is through program templates. So Natalie had mentioned this earlier, is just coming up with a way that you can easily scale programs that you're kind of rinse and repeating a lot of. So what we do is we have tokens throughout these program templates that makes it easier on us to actually customize them for each one. And it sounds like that could be done here if you aren't already doing it. And we use On24 as our webinar platform. So each webinar has its unique URL that actually we use as a token in that program to token into the reminder emails that they can access the webinar. And we also utilize the calendar token as well. So I would guess that Zoom has something similar, that you can pull that URL and actually token that into your program. And it can be, within your fulfillment email. So when somebody registers, they have that unique link there, or within that calendar token that you have access to within the event program type as well. So I would recommend looking there and coming up with some sort of tokenized system that you can utilize that token, drop it into whatever assets you have available within those programs, and that should be able to make it a little more scalable for you.
Awesome, great. And the next question, going to Megan. My company is looking into using Saros to build better landing pages, etc. Are you familiar with it, and can you speak to the Marketo integration?
Yeah, so I am familiar with using Saros for interactive content. It actually uses a Marketo form that you can actually integrate. So if you have a campaign that you've built out inside of Saros, you can add a Marketo form to that page, and then you can capture lead information that way. I do know you can only integrate one Marketo account at a time. So if you have multiple Marketo instances, you will only be able to integrate one. But yeah, we've found success with using Marketo forms for lead gen from Saros pages.
Great. Thanks so much, Megan. This next question is for Chris W. Chris, how can I create segmentation for variable content for values not on the lead person table? An example, I have additional values in a custom object linked to lead that I want to provide variable content for. Thanks.
Yeah, so that's a question that comes up all the time. Basically, you have a couple different options here. Depending on the level of specificity that you're talking from like a personalization standpoint, going back to our very first answer, velocity and scripting tokens can totally read objects that are connected to the leader person table. So that's an opportunity. You could write it as a velocity token to do the personalization and to show the content you want to show based on whatever values are in that additional table. But kind of a workaround if you don't want to work that way, I mean, it depends on how many segmentations you're talking about. So custom objects aren't available in segmentations in Marketo. Like when you set up a segmentation, you can't use custom object data. Because you can't like trigger off of it and things of that nature. So it's hard for it to read. So what we've done in kind of pockets in the past is you can run like a batch on like a daily basis, for example, that queries against your custom object just as a daily smart campaign batch or weekly or however frequently makes sense, and puts people into a handful of static lists that are basically for whatever your different categories of your segmentation would be. Then you can reference those different static lists in a segmentation and kind of proceed as normal. But again, if you have 50 of these, it's probably not the smartest thing. If there's 5, that seems pretty manageable. But basically, you could set up an automated process to run a batch that kind of buckets people into your different segmentations and then just read their list membership as a way to actually put them into a segment and use dynamic content or snippets in kind of the normal way. But to do it like at scale, if you have a ton of it, or there's multiple fields you need to reference in combination, and it's this and that or whatever, I would definitely point again towards velocity. That's kind of what that's really, really, really good at.
Great, thanks so much for that, Chris. Next question is going to Chris S. The question is, currently list imports are the only way to get these people added in Marketo. Do you have any other suggestions to integrate these leads more easily? More easily into Marketo with this use case? Tried Zapier, but didn't find it any faster than manually importing into Marketo. creating multiple Marketo landing pages to create the integration seems just as unwieldy.
Yeah, so I think I'm trending with what you're asking here. We have quite a few content syndication vendors that are constantly uploading leads into our database from campaigns that we're running with those vendors. So what we had done originally were we were doing server-side posts where you would have a form and they would basically post to that form, which is actually going away in Marketo. So you can use it now somewhat, but it sounds like that is actually going away fairly soon. So what we've started to do is actually just have the vendors connect via API directly into Marketo. So they're actually just inputting those leads directly into Marketo without us having to touch them. So if you're working with a vendor to get these leads, I would search or go through the process of having them set up to the API to just import them directly, which makes it easier on you. You don't really have to touch it. If it's something that you're doing, again, I would look into possibly doing that yourself to make it easier on you instead of having to go through the list import like you said. So if you're doing that over and over again, obviously time consuming, you have to go through creating the list, importing them, mapping all the fields. So if you can use the API route, I would definitely recommend that. There's a lot less room for error there, in my opinion. So yeah, I would, if you're working with a vendor, reach out to them to see if that's an option there. Otherwise, an internal process to build that API connection might be the way to go for you.
Amazing. Great advice, Chris S. Next question that is going to be going to Megan. Megan, how do you account for bot clicks in your data analysis?
Yeah, so we see bot clicks a lot, and I know this is a really common issue for a lot of people. There's multiple ways you can kind of handle this. For us, we see bots clicking every single link in the email. So we have implemented kind of like a hidden link that only a bot would be able to click on, and you can't go in the email and click it yourself. So it's kind of like a hidden link in the email, so we know if that link is clicked, it's a bot, and that's a way for us to identify it. I also look at links that were clicked a minimum number of times in order to kind of filter out and kind of identify where some of the bad data may be. I know this is something Marketo is actively working on as well, and they are just coming out with some features and functionalities to help identify bot clicks. So that's going to be really helpful in the future as well. And Chris W., if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I think bot clicks are a hot topic among many of us digital marketers. Yeah, the only other thing we do beyond you can have a hidden link, we do that too. We do periodic analyses. I'll actually pull down like all email activities for any by person over a long period of time. And we'll actually look at like the domain level. Do we see like 100% click rates on emails from a particular domain? And we just basically flag those as kind of auto-click domains. And that way we can at least kind of scrub some of our reporting. So where we believe they are there to be happening, we can kind of get a pulse on what we think is really happening. But the main thing that we do is we actually score only the web page view. So I actually don't use kind of the kind of email click activity almost anywhere. Our set successes and our interesting moments and our lead scoring opportunities actually happen on the landing page view. And we use like UTMs and things like that we're putting in our actual email messages to kind of filter out where the traffic is coming from, so that we can appropriately kind of change somebody's status in a program, things of that nature. So we kind of just have bypassed the click activity for the most part, because it is very, very sporadic. Like as Megan said, it's like you can try to kind of get them with multiple clicks or a hidden link, but that's not foolproof either. We at least haven't seen much noise in the web page side of things. So.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris W. Moving on to Chris S. This question just came in. We're wanting to start displaying our products in our email. Think the name, description, image, and price. We're exploring the idea of a content database that could hold all of this data for each product and allow us to pull in the product to our emails using a unique ID. Has anyone done this? Is there an integration that you would recommend?
Yeah, this is a great question, and something that we started kind coming up on 3 years ago, we launched a resource center on our website where we have 6 pillars that we've identified as kind of pain points or topics of interest for our ICPs. So what we've done is we've categorized all of our content into those 6 buckets. So that way, when someone engages with this specific pieces of content, we know generally what they're interested in by engaging with that content. So what we've done is we've done this on the nurture side. So we've created a nurture with different streams based on those content buckets. And what you could do is something similar here, where you would create a segmentation, and each of those segments you could have based on what they're engaging with and how it relates to your products. So then each segment you could have related to a product, and your list building, if you will be related to the assets or the content that you have on those products. So if they're engaging with X, they're going to get a specific segment or get entered into a specific segment. By doing that, you can identify, again, what products they're related to based on that content that they're engaging with. So I would recommend going that route. Identify how to categorize your content, and then build that into or work that into segmentations. And by doing that, you can create dynamic emails using that segmentation to dynamically populate, subject lines, imagery in emails, copy in emails, so on and so forth. But my advice would be to start with bucketing those products into, how can you relate your content to those products, and then work into the segmentation. And by doing that, then you can actually create the dynamic emails from that segmentation. So I know that was a lot. If you need to connect afterwards or whatever, I think we're going to probably give our info out. So happy to dive further into that. But yeah, we do exactly that right now, and it's been great for us.
Thank you so much, Chris. That's great to speak from experience. Chris W., this one's for you. Are there any other options to pre-fill a form with subscription preferences from Marketo? For example, if someone just visits the LP, the landing page.
Yes, absolutely. So a while back, maybe it was a year ago, Marketo from a security standpoint had a change in the kind of rules of when pre-fill can and can't occur on Marketo landing pages, which is what you're referring to. Now, basically, they have to get to, or out of the box, they have to get to a Marketo landing page from a Marketo email for pre-fill to work. The great news there is if you go in community and you search for, I think it was called, I'll have to find the link and I will send it to whoever asked this question. Sanford Whiteman has a post on his blog about pre-fill, and it actually will work both on Marketo landing pages and it works on your website as well, so long as you have like a custom subdomain set up. Like, so if you have pages.yourcompany.com, it'll work on both. And basically it's just, it's a JavaScript file you have to put in your what's it called, design studio, and then one kind of landing page template you have to kind of set up on the Marketo side. And basically you can add fields to that you need to be able to pre-fill, and it'll work for anyone that's cookied, no matter how that they get there. So it's not that technical. It's a little bit of technical work. I'm confident that someone could read Sandy's instructions and do it as I did, and get it set up. But that is the option for sure. And it does exist. It's not that crazy. And then once it's up, it just kind of works. So I'll get the info of whoever this was and I'll email you a link afterwards.
Thanks so much, Chris. Megan, we're going to have this next question go to you. The question is, have you set up and utilized the Experience Cloud audience sharing and syncing to other Adobe tools like Analytics? What is the use case, and how do you do it after adding the org ID? We would want to use it for better attribution and program insights that the bulk extract does not provide.
Yeah, so once you add in the org ID, it actually starts doing kind of like a cookie match. So it's essentially using the data it has from the Marketo tracking pixel or the Munchkin code and kind of matching it back if it can find a match in Adobe Experience Cloud. So you can pass lists in both directions from certain platforms. But again, it's based on that cookie match. So you might not get like a one-to-one relationship. If you pass like 10 leads, you may not see 10 in the platform itself, for example. But a lot of times it is just passing an audience right now based on a one-time list push. So essentially, if you have a list, you can share that list with the tool that you're wanting to go to. For us, we've done it with Adobe Target. So I create a list, I push it to Adobe Target, and then we use that for personalization. So that's something you can do. And I know Marketo is working on coming up with a continuous sync. So right now you do have to go in and push the list every time you want to sync it. But moving forward, they will have continuous audience sync.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Megan. It looks like we are waiting for a couple more questions to come in. Natalie, this one just came in for you. I work for a global company, and we don't find communication limits particularly useful because send times may be next day but fall within a 24-hour window. Any other recommendations on how we can manage communication limits globally?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this recently came up at my company. We have a bunch of different business units that are in our Marketo instance. So we all kind of run our own campaigns, kind of have our own operations. So as you can imagine, our communication limits can differ quite a bit. So I haven't actually done it myself, but one of my partners on the other business unit side actually set up a series of smart lists. So they kind of just left aside the global communication limits. You know, other people in our workspace are using them. My team is still using them. But they wanted something a little bit more custom. So they actually set up a series of smart lists to look to see. And in their case, they're trying to limit it to, I think, 1 in a week period. So they created a custom smart list to look to see if anyone was sent an email in the past week, you know, so super simple smart list. And then they use that as an exclusion list on all of their campaigns. So if there was something where they wanted to override it, it's super easy to remove that from their filters. But if they wanted to keep it on everything, it was easy to stay there. And since it sounds like you probably have some, you know, more dynamic things at play, it might just be a matter of creating, you know, smart lists for different regions or things like that, where they can actually look for emails sent in their own specific area, as opposed to like more globally.
Great. Thanks so much, Natalie. It looks like we're waiting for a couple more questions to come in. So if you guys have any questions, please put those in your Q&A box. Looks like one just came in. This one is going to Chris W. Chris W., any tips on getting images to work in
Yeah, so getting images to work in an email. I mean, it's a bit of a tricky question because usually it has to do with the kind of the email service provider or whatever platform the recipient has. So a lot of web email providers like Gmail and Yahoo, some do and some don't block images by default. You kind of have to, the user has to add you as a trusted source. And here in the B2B world, I know for a fact that pretty much every Outlook version not only doesn't play nice with images to start with, you kind of have to code everything very, very explicitly in tables and with divs to make sure that everything kind of renders as you'd like it to. But you know, once they enable that trusted sender, whatever that is, they should show up no problem. If you're having issues with images actually rendering, like how they're displaying, they look skewed, they're not centered, they're not aligned, that's definitely like, I use a combination of different kind of QA platforms that kind of the most common or most talked about ones that I hear about, and you guys chime in if you use a different one, are kind of Email and Acid from a QA perspective, or using Litmus. And basically those platforms let you send a test email kind of over to the platform, and it'll show you how it will render across all the different internet service providers and email platforms. So, you know, if you're having rendering issues in Outlook, it'll show you that. But there's that kind of baseline hurdle of images even showing up as kind of, that's just based on the email platform the user is on. So if you're B2C, probably less of an issue. B2B, it probably is more of an issue.
Yeah, I would add to that a little bit if I can. Is Marketo has a tool called deliverability tools that gives you access to look at what they call as design informant, I think, where you can actually send a test email through this tool, and it will actually show you how that email renders across different devices, platforms, ESPs, all that good stuff. So that's one that we use, especially with new templates, to send tests through that to see how they're rendering. And we've got a front end developer on site that builds these. So it's a great tool for him to actually send out. Outlook is really tricky, like Chris was saying. So this is a good tool for us and our business. We send to, we're B2B. So a lot of our people in our database are Outlook users. So that's one that is great for him to be able to send and test emails through, and it's linked through Marketo, so you can actually get it. It's called deliverability tools. So you can actually get the design informant piece where you can look how it renders, again, across different devices and whatnot. But you can also do inbox informant as well, which shows you how it's actually delivering to the inbox versus junk folder or anything like that. So definitely something to look into.
Awesome. And Chris, as we do have another question for you. The question is how to best handle duplicates in my database.
Yeah, this is a good one. So I'm going to give you kind of a two-part answer. First one gets back to one of my recommendations earlier is the community. So this is one that I know I've read through in the community quite a few times. So there's a ton of good resources out there for different scenarios and solutions and how it's unique to different companies. So I definitely recommend going out there to search around to see how other people are handling duplicates, things to think about when removing duplicates or merging records. It's a good resource to utilize. The second part is, so we intentionally have duplicates in our database because of kind of our industry. So we have business owners that own franchises, for example. So we have multiple records for each of those. It's not the best solution, but we have solutions built out in Salesforce, our CRM, that actually monitors the ones that we intentionally have as duplicates compared to ones that we want to merge to existing records. So you can build out processes in Salesforce to look for these as well and build scenarios out to deduplicate on that side as well. So you don't necessarily have the solution for this only in Marketo. If you've got some advanced Salesforce admins or CRM admins that you have access to, I would reach out to them as well. So you don't necessarily have the solution for this only in Marketo. You can utilize your CRM to solution for duplicates as well.
Great. Thanks so much, Kosa. The next question is going to Megan. Megan, the question is pre-form fill out versus progressive profiling.
Yeah, so for form pre-fill, essentially that when someone comes to a landing page and you have this information in Marketo, it will pre-fill the form with the information you have in your database. So it will pre-fill the person's name, last name, or whichever fields are on your form if that information is in your database. And progressive profiling, that is if you have a form on your page and you only want to display a certain number of fields. So say at first you only want to display name and email fields on your form. And the next time someone comes to the page, you can display different fields to try to capture more information. So they're a bit different, but they are helpful. If maybe people are worried that their form is too long, they can use progressive profiling to kind of collect information over time. So yeah, we use both.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Megan. Natalie, this next question is going to you. Natalie, how does your company determine MQL and SQL thresholds? How did you develop the initial model, and do you update and refresh it over time?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. So I want to open it up to the others on the call too after I kind of give how we work through it, because I know everyone's a little bit different. So we're about 4 years into our MQL, SQL process at McGraw-Hill. And one of the first steps we did was we established kind of a broader team of people to really take ownership of it. And I think that really helped. We had buy-in from sales and marketing to work through the initial model. So we kind of had, buy-in across the organization as to what people were seeing, what matters to the reps, what trends reps were seeing, with people's engagements with our digital marketing programs. And then going forward, we kind of had that initial model and we revisit it twice a year. So we get feedback from the reps through focus groups and surveys, see what's working, see what's not working. And we really tweak things over the years. We've added new metrics into the scoring. We've removed things that, are not that important as we thought originally. So we really take that opportunity to refresh and kind of just look at everything, take things out, put new things in, at least 2 times a year. And I think too, it's having that ownership across marketing and sales. I think marketing can't do it in a bubble. I've been in organizations where we've tried to do that. And I think having that partnership, especially with sales leadership, really makes a difference in kind of pushing that forward and getting buy-in from the model and through, just adoption and follow-up too. Does anybody else want to chime in with any of their own experiences?
I can jump in. I mean, typically, the scale, if you're talking about how do you determine the thresholds, usually it's like 100, right? And like the way I've seen most people attack that is we say if 100 equals an MQL, well, what type of actions that we're scoring against would get someone over that? Like what combination of things makes sense to say, yeah, that person seems like they'd be an MQL, and kind of build out your individual activity scores from there. And then like Natalie said, you have to revisit it like very, very intentionally and periodically. But yeah, I would just add that.
Yeah, and the one thing to note too is we kind of established 3 levels of, score values. So we have like a low, medium, and high, and that's really helped us every time we go to look at something. Where does it fit in? If it's high level, is it an automatic MQL? There's some things that do qualify for that. So I'd keep that in mind too. If there's something that's really high value to your sales reps, to account for it that way too.
Yeah, those fast track opportunities for sure. Yep.
Awesome. Looks like we're waiting for a couple new questions to come in. If you guys want to send in any new questions in the Q&A box, please do so now. If not, it might be helpful. I know that Chris, as at the beginning, spoke to how new users or new Marketo users can get into Marketo, but it might be good to get any of your guys' others' opinions on that, because I know that we do have quite a few new Marketo users on these webinars.
I can jump in there. At least from my perspective, one of the first things we always do when we onboard someone that's brand new to Marketo is have them go, I don't know what it's called now, is it Marketo Core Concepts out on the university? It's kind of the intensive 2 to 4 day training, depending, I don't know how it's set up anymore. It's been a little bit since I've had someone go through it. We find that's super helpful to get on the, on the Zoom or the call with, resources from Marketo that take them through Marketo basics, what are programs, what type of programs are there? And it's all super hands-on. And we found that super valuable for someone who's coming into Marketo that's never been in there before. They can get that base Marketo knowledge, and then our team can pick up and do training on how we use Marketo, and things that are unique to our instance. So I know that's a big one for us.
Awesome. Thanks, Natalie. Megan or Chris, do you want to speak to that at all, having a new user to Marketo?
Yeah, we do a ton of template training, like internally amongst ourselves. So I think like others have spoken to here, ton of templates that we have created for programs and for different scoring opportunities and asset types. So really my team, so the way we're structured is a little different in that myself and my team, we kind of admin the instance, and then we have a whole big group of actual like marketers who are our users. I don't think I've ever deployed an email out of Marketo. You know what I mean? Like we're a little bit different than most in that way. But basically we manage all these templates. So we have tons of documentation we walk through. We use tags, we use this, we use that. So for us, it's more about internal training. we'll absolutely reiterate what Natalie said. We do core concepts with all of our new users as well. I agree with what Chris said earlier. Community is the best source for specific questions because I guarantee you someone has asked and it's been answered before. And if not, you can ask it and someone probably will answer it. But yeah, to me, it's, you know what, the only other resource I can recommend is Joe Wrights has a really good YouTube series, Marketo Foo, which when I first started 3.5 years ago was a great visual guide with a really, really kind of experienced MOPS Pro kind of walking you through the ins and outs in some specific program types. So that's the only thing I'll really add is that Marketo Foo YouTube series that Joe's put together.
Yeah, and Joe used to be a champion. He's an alum now, but that's a great recommendation, Chris. Chris, we got a question come in for you. The question is, I've heard people sync UTM parameters to the Salesforce campaign member object. Is this a best practice? If so, how can I map the proper fields and create this automation?
Yeah, I can try to answer this question. What I will say is I've never done this, and I haven't heard of people doing it, but it makes a ton of sense to me. Just like custom fields on kind of campaign members, that to me seems like the right use case here, because it gives you the ability to buy, Salesforce campaign to mention somebody's and kind of keep tabs on somebody's, their source, their medium, whatever the UTMs that you guys are practicing are. I haven't done it. I'm not sure if it's best practice. To me, that just seems like you probably have to do some heavy lifting on anytime you're syncing Salesforce campaigns at the program level, making sure whatever those fields are that you're trying to sync are being properly captured and mapped appropriately. I haven't mapped the custom object fields or the custom fields over to my CRM. So I really, unfortunately, can't speak to it directly. To me, it makes a ton of sense strategically. My head goes to how do you report it and why does it matter? Like if we're trying to pursue leads based on UTMs, great. If it's just for reporting, I'm not sure why it needs to be in the CRM, right? You could capture that inside Marketo, make it a whole lot less complicated and probably still get the reporting you need. So I guess it really, to me, just comes down to what the intention of the usage is. Because if there's a sales enablement element here, great. If it's you just want to tell them where they came from, maybe you do that in the MQL handoff stage, or you put that in an interesting moment, or you do something like that where you can get the information into the CRM without having to build kind of a complex integration or kind of two-way communication stream with these custom fields. But that's just my 2 cents. I haven't done it, but I get why people would want to, for sure.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Chris. Megan, this next question is for you. The question is, working on a migration, is there a way to migrate files?
Yeah, so for us, we actually use the Marketo's bulk API. So you can actually import CSV files if you have those using the API. And so that obviously for us goes a lot faster than just doing a simple list import. We also use that for different integrations just because it can handle more volume. So I would definitely look into the bulk API for importing and exporting files because it will save you a lot of time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Megan. Chris S., this next question is for you. How many drip campaigns do you run at a time?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I just double checked how many active ones we have right now. So we actively have 15 right now. It doesn't mean that necessarily they're for the same channels or same audience, although there is some overlap. And a few years ago, we started with one. We had one going. We put a lot of effort into it. And while that one was running, I think we had that one going for 1.5 years or 2 years. We made tweaks to it, but we had one solid foundation to start with and then started moving on to smaller, more niche ones, if you will. So it really depends on your use case, how many different channels you have, how complex you want to make them. Like I said, we started with one, started working with more and more. And as we got more comfortable with it, as our team grew, we were able to add more in there. So again, it's really dependent on your business, what the needs are. But for example, we have some for prospects, we have some for clients, we have some for specifically against competitors that speaks to some of those things. So it depends on you for the most part. But I would say build a good foundation. Once you start having more and more, put some time into how people can flow through those. So what are the priorities of if somebody comes to your website, does multiple things, where should they go? If they qualify for multiple drip campaigns or nurtures at one time, which one should they get first? That's what we've started to kind of architect in the background a couple of years ago once we started adding on more and more. And we started to really think about, okay, how should we move people throughout these nurtures? How should that buyer journey look based on where they come from, who they are, what they're engaging with? So that is kind of a phase two once you start adding some nurtures is how people should move throughout those.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Chris. Natalie, this next question is for you. Could you please talk about your best practices for documenting your Marketo instance? Do you use Word or Wiki? What does an outline look like for your documentation?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think it really depends on your organization as far as like the tool you use. It's kind of what's going to have the most adoption across your users and the people who are referencing them. Personally, for us, we're a pretty simple Microsoft company. We use Word for almost everything for our documentation. We have Microsoft OneDrive to store it all in a centralized place. I think it really depends on the tools that you have and what makes sense for your company. But that's kind of the route we've gone just because it's accessible by everyone. Everyone has access to it. They can easily get into the documents and kind of see what they have. As far as the documentation itself, I would say anything that you're doing that's a repeated process. So if it's a program template people are going to be using, if it's an integration, if it's data cleanup, kind of anything that's a repeated process that you're going to be doing, I think it's good to have documentation to support that. What I really try to do when I create a new documentation, any links out to Marketo, links out to other documents they should be referencing. I think as much as you can put in there and make it, there's no questions that need to be answered, when they look at that, I think it's, the most helpful. Outline wise, I tend to take things kind of at a very ordered way of doing things, step by step. I prefer kind of a number of documents, this is what you do first, this is what you do last, and kind of think of it in the way that you're building, your program or the integration. What has to be done first in order for things to kind of flow through appropriately. I know it's pretty high level, but I think, make sure you have the information where people can find it in your organization, and then just include as much as you can in your documentation.
Awesome. Does anyone else want to speak to that, their documentation and their instance?
The only thing I can add is, like I said, we're a little different in that it's like the admins and the users. So we do the documentation, and we more document, amongst ourselves, we document our processes and things, but the main documentation we produce is more process oriented for the users. And frankly, we do screenshots in either a Word doc or a PowerPoint, depending on it doesn't have to be that complicated. But to me, visuals help, naming conventions help. We also try to put instructions inside our actual, the templates and things themselves, like in the assets. You can use the description field in Marketo to say, hey, don't forget, this is the naming convention for this type of asset. And that way, even if they change what your default kind of placeholder name is, the recommended content is always there. But I think Natalie's spot on with it's really dependent upon your company, what platform makes sense for you. But yeah, for us, it's screenshots, basically.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Chris. Megan and Chris S., do you have anything to speak to for documentation?
Not really. I would add that we need to do more of it, admittedly. So it's something that, it's a good habit to have.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we are coming to the end of the hour. If we didn't get to your questions, I know that some of us are going to reach out to you with some of our information or who can answer those specific questions. But look out for an email from us later this week for the wrap-up and the recording of this. And just want to say thank you all for joining the office hours today in December, and we hope to see you next month.